Don't answer questions. There's something aha. No supervisor. We are not clean one. We are.
Tiffany Henyard, once the most notorious mayor, has seemingly disappeared from the public eye in recent months. While the drama surrounding her continues to escalate, rumors swirl that she is now attempting to evade the intense legal pressures closing in on her, possibly going into hiding. Federal investigations and legal troubles continue to gain momentum, but the real question remains: how long can she keep running before the inevitable catches up with her? The community of Dalton, once under her leadership, has witnessed an increasingly rapid shift in the dynamic surrounding her leadership. Once a highly controversial mayor, her tenure now teeters on the brink of collapse, and many have resigned themselves to the idea that her chaotic reign is nearing its end. The town's board of trustees, previously reluctant to confront Henyard's behavior, seems to have finally recognized the mounting frustrations of the community. In a telling moment that symbolized just how far Henyard had fallen, she called for a town meeting, only to be met with a complete and resounding snub. Not a single board member bothered to attend the meeting. This blatant rejection from her peers highlighted how untenable her leadership had become. It showed that even those who once supported her were no longer willing to condone her actions. Tiffany Henyard had become a figurehead of political dysfunction, a person who refused to listen to any voices but her own. The shift in attitude among the board of trustees was a clear signal that they were done tolerating her behavior, and that patience for her antics had finally run out. Henyard's troubles were not limited to her declining political support, however. The federal investigations into her alleged financial misconduct, corruption, and abuse of power were intensifying. Reports were emerging that revealed a shocking misuse of taxpayer money, as Henyard was said to have spent lavishly on luxury travel, first-class flights, upscale accommodations, and extravagant personal expenses, all while the town she was meant to serve continued to suffer from pressing issues. With every new detail that surfaced, the walls around Henyard seemed to be closing in. The once untouchable mayor now had fewer allies and fewer options. Perhaps the most alarming aspect of the situation was the extent of Henyard's financial mismanagement. Investigations revealed that over a 5-month period, she and her team had racked up a staggering $67,000 in taxpayer-funded travel expenses. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that, in total, Henyard and her associates had charged over $100,000 to the public purse. The mayor's justification for these expenditures was as weak as it was laughable. She claimed that the expenses were incurred while attending conferences. But this excuse seemed unconvincing, given her documented history of lavish getaways and high-end accommodations. Henyard had seemingly abandoned the responsibilities of governing Dalton, instead prioritizing her own indulgence. While these revelations were shocking, they were far from the only issues with Henyard's administration. The Illinois Attorney General's office had called for greater transparency in government operations, but Henyard and her administration ignored calls for accountability. Documents detailing financial transactions were withheld, delayed, or simply ignored to keep the public from uncovering the full extent of her mismanagement. However, these efforts to conceal the truth were doomed to fail, as investigators persisted and uncovered a disturbing picture of financial recklessness. Henyard's administration had become a breeding ground for scandal after scandal. From wrongful terminations and intimidation tactics to lavish personal spending and blatant disregard for transparency, the town was left reeling. Yet, despite the mounting evidence against her, Henyard continued to spin her own narrative, claiming that the public backlash was nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated to discredit her. In one of her most dramatic moments, she even held a public meeting where she boldly declared that all the corruption allegations against her were merely part of a massive propaganda campaign. She dismissed her critics as mere haters, claiming that their animosity toward her was rooted in jealousy and envy, but no amount of deflection could mask the growing outrage among the residents of Dalton. Tired of the theatrics, someone in the crowd bluntly interrupted her, saying what many were already thinking: "We already know you're stealing from us." Despite this, Henyard persisted with her speech, claiming that her power had grown too quickly and that everyone had a problem with her because she was so rare and so unique. She seemed to suggest that all the public criticism was simply a result of her success and power, but behind her grandstanding, Henyard's administration was facing serious legal and financial consequences. A deeper investigation into the township's finances uncovered a disturbing pattern of reckless spending. The most egregious example came in the form of a trip to Austin, Texas, in July 2023, where Henyard, her right-hand man Keith Freeman, and 3 other township officials spent an eye-popping $220,000 in taxpayer funds. The receipts from the trip included $111,000 spent on the luxurious Fairmont Austin Hotel, $389 for state dinners at Ruth's Chris, and even $53 on sports-related expenses. Further investigation revealed that Henyard's personal photographer was paid $1,425, while other expenditures included more than $4,700 spent at Walmart, Target, and Amazon. These expenses were far from isolated, as documents also revealed Henyard's extravagant auto lease payments, totaling over $374 for vehicle expenses. The growing financial revelations painted a damning picture of Henyard's leadership, demonstrating a pattern of systematic financial mismanagement. Yet, when confronted with the facts, Henyard's response was to deflect and dismiss the criticism. She seemed to view these outrageous expenses as nothing more than minor inconveniences, rather than serious breaches of public trust. Residents of Dalton, once loyal to their mayor, were now in an uproar. The public's patience had worn thin, and the growing calls for accountability were impossible to ignore. In January 2024, following a detailed investigative report into Henyard's excessive spending, a more thorough review of the township's credit card transactions was conducted. The results were shocking. $67,000 had been spent on out-of-town trips in just 5 months. A further $33,900 was spent on additional trips to cities like New York, Atlanta, and Portland. The continued revelations of fiscal mismanagement only served to fuel the fire of public outrage in response to these growing concerns. Some members of Dalton's Board of Trustees began to speak out. Trustee Tammy Brown, a vocal critic of Henyard, revealed that she had made multiple requests for the township's financial records, only to be denied access. "When you see things like this, it's like a kick in the gut," Brown remarked, noting that Henyard had deliberately attempted to conceal the extent of her reckless spending. The financial scandal took a dramatic turn when the parent company of a local news outlet filed a lawsuit in Cook County Circuit Court to force Henyard to release the financial records. The judge sided with the news outlet, dismissing Henyard's attempts to avoid scrutiny and compelling the township to release records dating from July to November 2023. These records revealed the full extent of Henyard's spending, shedding light on the exorbitant costs associated with her luxury travel, first-class flights, and lavish hotel stays. As the scandal unfolded, it became clear that Henyard's administration had been marked by a flagrant disregard for the public's trust. Taxpayer funds had been used to fund a lavish lifestyle that bore no resemblance to the needs of the community. Despite this, Henyard remained defiant, continuing to present herself as a victim of a smear campaign rather than accepting any responsibility for her actions. The revelations about her financial excesses sparked outrage among both residents and officials. Questions were raised about the oversight mechanisms in place to prevent such blatant misuse of public funds. How could such egregious mismanagement go unnoticed for so long? What reforms were needed to prevent future abuses of power as the legal and public pressure mounted? Henyard's reign appeared to be rapidly coming to an end. The residents of Dalton had reached their limit, and the demand for accountability was deafening. Henyard may have thought she could outlast the storm, but the walls were closing in, and it seemed inevitable that she would eventually face the consequences of her actions. With the investigations ongoing and the public's patience exhausted, the question was no longer whether Henyard would be held accountable, but when. It was clear that her days as mayor were numbered, and the people of Dalton were waiting for the moment when the full truth would be revealed and justice would be served.
I did not have it.
But those charges are for you.
No fucks.
You didn't go to Las Vegas?
In recent months, Tiffany Henyard, once the most notorious and controversial mayor of Dalton, has largely vanished from the public eye. Yet, despite her apparent disappearance, the drama surrounding her only intensifies. Rumors have swirled that Henyard has gone into hiding, attempting to evade federal investigations and mounting legal troubles. The question on everyone's mind is how long she can stay out of sight before the inevitable consequences of her actions catch up with her. It appears that the chaotic reign of Henyard is coming to an end, and many are sitting back, popcorn in hand, awaiting the next twist in this ongoing saga. Is Henyard actively fleeing accountability, or is she simply lying low, hoping the storm will pass? One thing is clear. The residents of Dalton are no longer willing to sit quietly while she avoids responsibility. The backlash against her leadership has reached a boiling point, with the town's board of trustees finally acknowledging the growing frustrations of the community. In a stunning moment, Henyard called for a town meeting, only to be met with complete silence. Not a single board member attended. This blatant snub reflected how far her leadership had fallen. The board's decision to no longer cater to her demonstrated their refusal to tolerate a mayor who ignored opposing perspectives and only listened to her own voice. The shift in attitude among the board of trustees signaled that their patience with Henyard had run out. What was once a mayoral administration marked by unfulfilled promises and controversy had descended into isolation, with even Henyard's former allies beginning to distance themselves. Federal investigations into allegations of financial misconduct, corruption, and abuse of power have only added fuel to the fire. Reports have revealed that Henyard allegedly spent taxpayer money recklessly on personal luxuries, such as first-class travel and upscale accommodations, all while the community she was supposed to serve struggled with real issues. The walls around Henyard are closing in. As the investigations continue, her once loyal allies are being forced to reckon with their association with a leader who has become a symbol of political chaos and alleged corruption. For many in Dalton, the question is no longer whether Henyard will face consequences, but when her final reckoning will come. She may be attempting to evade the public eye, but there is no escaping the truth for much longer. Despite attempts to dodge responsibility, Henyard recently called a public meeting, turning it into a dramatic spectacle. In a defiant speech, she claimed that the corruption scandal engulfing her administration was nothing more than a propaganda campaign designed to discredit her. "How lovely to take power," she said. "This is my statement. If you don't want to hear it, go to the door. It's not a Q&A. It's just my statement so that the people of Dalton are aware of what's happening." But the residents, exhausted by her theatrics, were no longer willing to listen. One person in the crowd bluntly cut her off, stating what most were already thinking. "We already know you're stealing from us." Unfazed, Henyard continued her speech, dismissing her critics as jealous of her success. "That's what all the hate is about," she insisted. "Your super mayor became too powerful too quickly, and as a result, everyone has problems. I'm so rare. I'm so unique. It's all about control." However, the allegations against her went far beyond bad PR. At the heart of the scandal were serious accusations of financial misconduct, dubious expenditures, and blatant misuse of taxpayer money. WGN investigators uncovered an astonishing pattern of reckless spending, with over $67,000 in taxpayer-funded travel expenses racked up in just 5 months. The total cost soared to more than $100,000 when additional expenses were included. Henyard claimed these expenses were tied to attending conferences, but few believed this flimsy excuse, given her history of lavish getaways and high-end accommodations. During months when Dalton was in desperate need of leadership, Henyard appeared more focused on pursuing her own desires for power, prestige, and personal indulgence. Her financial excesses didn't end there. Documents obtained through the Illinois Attorney General's office revealed that her administration deliberately ignored government transparency laws. Vital financial records were delayed, withheld, or outright ignored in an attempt to prevent the public from discovering the full extent of Henyard's mismanagement. Yet, despite her efforts to cover up the truth, the evidence continued to pile up. Her tenure as mayor was increasingly marked by scandals. Wrongful terminations, intimidation tactics, lavish personal spending, and a blatant disregard for transparency. Even as the public's patience reached its breaking point, Henyard continued to deflect, denying any wrongdoing. Her once loyal supporters began to turn on her, and the investigations surrounding her administration gained steam. But Henyard's troubles were only beginning. Amid the federal scrutiny, her former assistant, Carmen Carlisle, came forward as a whistleblower. Willing to expose the truth, Carlisle accused Henyard of manipulating employees, vendors, and residents, using her power to expand her influence while maintaining a false image of success built on the backs of Dalton taxpayers. "I'm breaking my silence today," Carlisle declared, "because I believe Henyard has engaged in unethical and predatory behavior in the village of Dalton for the past 2 years." Once a trusted member of Henyard's administration, Carlisle now felt compelled to speak out against what she saw as an abuse of leadership. She emphasized that many more victims may still be too afraid to come forward, either due to fear of retaliation or deception from Henyard herself. Henyard's response to Carlisle's accusations was nothing short of dismissive. She ridiculed Carlisle during a public meeting, sarcastically suggesting that she deserved a new nickname, Lion Carlisle, before attempting to deflect blame. "If you had spoken up earlier, this wouldn't have escalated," Henyard said, trying to shift the focus away from her own wrongdoings. But Carlisle's decision to come forward only further exposed Henyard's refusal to take responsibility for her actions. Meanwhile, the investigation into Dalton's finances continued to grow more serious. Former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, now leading the inquiry into Dalton's financial crisis, revealed that nearly $5 million had gone missing due to Henyard's misappropriation of village funds. The financial crisis had been years in the making, with Dalton's general fund in a staggering $3.65 million deficit by May 31, 2024. The federal investigation, which had been prompted by the Dalton Board of Trustees' formal request, was uncovering troubling details about the mishandling of public funds. Henyard's actions became more egregious as the investigation revealed she had sold 6 police cars, weakening law enforcement's ability to serve the community. The decision to sell the vehicles was seen as a direct blow to public safety. Even more shocking was the revelation that, despite the township's financial struggles, Henyard continued to fund her personal security detail, a choice that was widely condemned as wasteful and self-serving. As Henyard's administration crumbled, the dysfunction was laid bare for all to see. Basic services were halted, and even simple community events, like an ice cream social for senior citizens, were ruined due to lack of planning and resources. The situation had reached a point where even basic needs for the community could not be met. Meanwhile, former Deputy Police Chief Lisa Lissai, once a staunch supporter of Henyard, found himself embroiled in his own legal troubles. Lissai was indicted on charges of bankruptcy fraud, perjury, and making false statements. Federal investigators accused him of hiding his finances and attempting to evade creditors, and it was alleged that Henyard was aware of his actions. This further deepened the cloud of scandals surrounding her administration. These revelations painted a damning picture of rampant corruption within Henyard's inner circle. The financial excesses, questionable decisions, and outright illegal activities were a stark contrast to the leadership Dalton residents had been promised. As the federal investigation closed in, it seemed increasingly unlikely that Henyard would be able to escape the consequences of her actions. Once a powerful figure, Henyard's grip on Dalton was slipping. The chaos surrounding her administration had eroded public trust, and residents were demanding answers. They had seen their town spiral into financial ruin, while their mayor lived a life of luxury, funded by the very taxpayers who were struggling to get by. With every new revelation, it became clear that Henyard's tenure as mayor was drawing to a close, and the residents of Dalton were ready to reclaim their town from the grasp of a self-serving political empire. As investigations continue, the full extent of Henyard's corruption and mismanagement is likely to be revealed. The people of Dalton, long neglected and misled, are now united in their demand for transparency and accountability. The final chapter of the saga is yet to be written, but one thing is certain. Tiffany Henyard's reign is quickly coming to an end,